Hi, it's Michael Weber from Porchlight Music Theatre. We are going to be producing one of the most extraordinary new musicals right here in Chicago that has had a short life at some theaters around the country, but I wanted to bring the creators of this show to you to talk about the wonderful new musical Ernest Shackleton Loves Me. And I am very lucky to have with me creators Joe DiPietro, who wrote the book for the musical, and the wonderful Val Vigoda, who wrote the lyrics and also was the star of the original production that not only played incredibly successfully off-Broadway, but was filmed for Broadway HD and captured her extraordinary performance. Thank you so much, the both of you, for taking a moment out of your busy days to talk with me and everybody here at Porchlight Music Theatre.
Yeah, we're thrilled. We're thrilled with the Porchlight show.
Yeah, we're excited you guys are doing the show.
Well, we couldn't be more delighted to be doing it. And everybody's been asking, what is this piece? What is, there's certain imagery that's out there. There's these compelling visual. There's some video. There's some photos. But I wanted to go right to the source of the creation of this. And what strikes me about it, which is really what I want to ask the both of you about. This is so intertwined to some degree with specific talents that you have, Val, as you were playing the leading character, that I do kind of go, this is a chicken or an egg thing. How did this develop? Did it develop first from your talents, or did it first develop, Joe, from you coming up saying, I want to write something about Ernest Shackleton? How did it all happen?
Kind of an interesting melange of all those things. Mm-hmm. My ex-partner and I, Brendan Milburn, who wrote the music, the score with me on this, he and I wanted to create something that would be a one-person show for me. This began as a one-person show. And at the time, we were busy parents. He could stay home. I could go perform, right? And we had been obsessed with Ernest Shackleton due to a museum exhibit we had seen years ago, and the incredible survival leadership story of him. And it actually would help us in our lives, right? Oh, there's a problem. What would Ernest Shackleton do? He was just such a hero to us. And then we were introduced to Joe, and we wanted to write something together. And so we were throwing around ideas, and we said, well, we have this unformed idea of doing some sort of solo show, but we want it to be big and epic and resonant, right? And I just threw out an idea, like about Ernest Shackleton. And Joe said, okay, that's interesting. Who's that? Told him the story of Shackleton and the survival story. And we happened to mention the banjo, right? That one of the wonderful things that Shackleton did was insist on them dragging the heavy banjo with them across the ice and singing. He knew how important music would be for them to survive. And as soon as Joe heard that, he was like, oh, that's our way in to the story. And he said, give me a week. And he went away and created an outline of this fantastical story of a modern woman, composer, violinist, person with my talents, who finds out about the story of Ernest Shackleton, and they meet in this crazy cross-time adventure and love story. And that was the genesis of the show. Eventually, as soon as we brought on the director, Lisa Peterson, she saw our one-person situation, and she said, oh, you're talking about Shackleton, you're calling him on the phone, where is he? Right. And as soon as we realized we needed to bring in a second person, the show really started to pop.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like when people ask me what the show is, I like to say Ernest Shackleton Loves Me is both an adventure tale about the greatest rescue mission ever and a love story that goes across time. And what I love about this show and the way we've told the story is that you can only tell this story in theater. Right. It's a very theatrical event. And I had seen Val perform, and I'd seen Val and Brendan's work, and I was a big fan. And when we talked about possibly doing something together, Val's a fantastic electric violinist and also can create music by keyboards, sort of this new type, at least then it was, looping and found music, which was like alien to me. And I was like, oh, can this one woman at the center of the story create this world? And she creates such a fantastical, inspiring world. She calls the great explorer Ernest Shackleton into her life, which is sort of teetering on the edge. And he takes her on the journey of the Endurance, which is, as I said, the most remarkable rescue mission in the history of the world, probably. And if you don't know it, come see the show, because I learned about it, and it's jaw-dropping what he did and how he rescued his men. So we sort of combined these elements, and we came up with a story that's both fantastical, and you could only do it in theater, but also very much a love story and an inspirational story about how, at the end of the day, there aren't necessarily Ernest Shackletons that are going to come and rescue us, but that, we have to find the Ernest Shackleton within ourselves.
Right.
Well said. Yeah, it's so much about relentless optimism and resilience, which is what he just displayed over and over and over in the worst, most horrifying circumstances and conditions possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then applying that in the show, my character is a single mom, worried that she's not going to be able to take care of her baby, and becoming her own version of Ernest Shackleton, to be able to know that everything's going to be okay regardless. It's just not only do I think it's a lovely message for everybody, but it was personally for me every day living that and singing it, and it's life-changing.
Yeah. I think what struck me about the show when I saw it, and I've of course seen the video of the Off-Broadway production, but then I was able to see it live in Milwaukee when it was presented at Skylight Musicals. And that the artistic director of Skylight, Michael Unger, is fantastic director, is going to be directing it here for us in Chicago. But you're absolutely right, Joe, that in the being in the same room as the experience happening is such an overwhelming and emotional, almost shocking kind of experience when you are going, he's going to do what? And there were how many men, and they're where, at what, with that this went on for so long that they didn't even know World War I began and concluded while they were down there. So it is a bit of a surprise to not only be sort of awash in this epic character and person, and then be reminded that it was a real person, but then this beautiful and a deeply emotional juxtaposition of this fully rounded and created character of Kat, of this young woman who is a single mom, who is trying to make her way, just trying to get through life. And you get very connected to her. And somehow, even in the face of Ernest Shackleton being a major character in the show, she is still your leading character. She is the one that you're caring about. What's going to happen to Kat?
Yeah, I absolutely. And I believe she's on stage the entire show. Ernest Shackleton sort of comes in and out. I won't spoil anything, but it's very much about Kat, and Val can certainly speak to this and what it's like feeling when you feel overwhelmed. I mean, and she's an artist, the type of artists we find all over, especially in theater, which is our milieu, and trying to make art and trying to present something positive to the world when maybe the money isn't there or the success isn't there, but sort of believing in what you do and still having a personal life of a family and trying to pay rent and all that. So yeah, it's very much the story about one woman finding her inner Ernest Shackleton, I would say, which, and I always use Ernest Shackleton even in my, much more comfortable life than any of those explorers had all the time. I'm actually speaking to you from my home in Connecticut, and there's a nice layer of snow on the ground. And I just took my dogs out, and I was like, ooh, I'm a little chilly walking these dogs. And I'm like, I always think Ernest Shackleton, like stuck in the Antarctic for months with his men and starving. And I'm like, I have to get inside. So yeah.
Once you learn the story, you can't unhear that story. You cannot unhear. I mean, and how apropos that the name of the ship was the Endurance, and
Right.
it's just so magical in that sense of it. Can we talk a little bit about and Joe, you've written a number of musicals now. Some of them, what you might call a traditional book musical kind of a form, but some of them interesting that they might be considered jukebox musicals, but also original scores. What was the process when you're writing this kind of a piece where somebody like Val is the performer and the lyricist and contributing to the music creation? How did you and Brendan and Val, and I'm inviting you, Val, also, I mean, just what was your working relationship?
I think as Val said, it started with, we met, I believe, at a party, actually, and I had seen their show Striking 12, and I was a big fan of Val as a performer. I was like, ooh, that's really unique what she does and fantastic. And then we met at this party, and I think maybe Val and Brendan had a little more sort of like downtown art musical vibes, and I had a little more uptown sort of commercial Broadway musical vibes. So I just thought, oh, this is an interesting juxtaposition of these two. I don't know if you agree with this or not, Val. Like creative, different ways of looking at creativity, and at least I'm always looking for collaborators who will sort of stretch me in a bit and challenge me in a bit, and take me to maybe an uncomfortable place in a bit, and just not personality wise, but just sort of like in the work they do. So I just thought, wow, what a fascinating idea. And then when I said, oh, what do you guys, do you guys have any ideas? And they were like, what about, a one woman show about Ernest Shackleton? And I was like, that's great. I don't even know what that means. And that just got me excited. And I wrote that, as Val mentioned, the outline of the show very quickly. And I just saw, oh, Val is a woman who is struggling, is an artist and a mother, and struggling with making herself heard in this world and being able to raise a baby on her own in trying circumstances. So that's sort of where that came from. But the process was, I think, very starting with the story, and then, like you do with any musical, be the, weird little art musicals downtown or big Broadway, bonanzas. You sort of basically write the story, and then you start writing songs.
Now, did you take into consideration when you were creating with Brendan the musical voice for Shackleton, in terms of the era that he is living in versus 2020, the early 2020s where Cat is living? Because so much of the music feels so completely appropriate, and yet it also retains this contemporary vibe to it.
Well, thank you. We did a bunch of listening to songs of the time, like Tipperary, for example, and that makes its way through along with the sound of the banjo, and mixing that with what we figured Cat would sound like with her violin and her electronics and the keyboard, was basically the palette of the show. Right. And it sort of began with her style. Right. And then when he arrives and we then are enveloped by Antarctica. Right. With all of the actual, one of the great things about his voyage is the actual photos and some film survived because he dragged them back. And we have these images all around us. And it became, at that point, more cinematic feeling, right? So more orchestral, more enveloping. And the inclusion of not only banjo tracks, but also Shackleton playing the banjo live. And then at one point, actually, the transfer of the banjo to Cat for her to start incorporating his live acoustic sound was just something that felt very organic in the process, but it felt like it worked. And
it didn't even occur to me until you're saying it right now that because Cat plays the electric violin, and just the merging of the two eras and even the evolution of a musical instrument from being something that is acoustic and a little more rudimentary towards something that is incredibly sophisticated, like with you playing, a 6-string Viper, which is such a unique modern instrument.
It looks like a Borg, appendage. And it was actually really fun. And Joe is so good at finding the humor in all the little moments. Shackleton's fascination with what the heck is this? And he gets to, come into her. Not only does she get to go into his world on the expedition, but there's also this sort of cross-liminal experience where he comes into her world and he's experiencing the pedals and the live looping, and it is shocking and funny to him.
Yeah. It's two extraordinary characters that how will we ever know the personality of who Ernest Shackleton was? And yet, Joe, you somehow forged an idea of what the man might be like. Oh, and by the way, let's now put him in a modern context. And here is a great character of curiosity and fascination and interest with people and interested in life. And it's been such a long time to be experiencing a show in which you walk out and you say, I know who those two people are.
Oh, that's great.
These writers forged two people who I know now as three-dimensional people with a wide range of emotions. It's an incredible accomplishment, and we could not be more excited to be bringing the Chicago premiere to Porchlight Music Theatre. What would, within our last moments here, what would the two of you just want to prepare the audience to expect at a production of Ernest Shackleton Loves Me? What kind of experience are they going to have?
Oh, I think it'll be emotional, surprisingly emotional, exciting, and we sort of basically put you in the shoes of Ernest Shackleton, trying to rescue his men in Antarctica. So, but it's also a romance. But I just think it's a complete theatrical experience that audiences will be entertained and delighted by, and will learn something from.
Right.
Absolutely. And I would just say that when you experience the story of Ernest Shackleton just on its own, it's so amazing. You're like, oh my God, how could he do that, in those circumstances? But then with our show, our goal is that people will walk out of there saying, well, he could do that, Kat could do that. I can do anything. I can face anything that life throws at me. So it's really an optimistic, uplifting show.
Inspirational, yeah.
Inspirational. That is the word that I remember thinking when I left the theater after seeing it for the first time. I thought you feel hopeful. You feel that, with everything that we're dealing with in the world today, you can certainly survive whatever is being thrown your way if they could do that. Val Vigoda and Joe DiPietro, thank you so much for your time and for this beautiful show. And we do hope you'll be able to come to Chicago and see it if you're here. But we're really honored to be presenting it.
Thrilled you are. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks so much, my friends.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.